Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this special telephone town hall for AFT and NEA members and their allies and activists. Tonight, we will be focusing on student debt and the recently announced changes to the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. We are honored to have with us United States Education Secretary Miguel Cardona and Undersecretary James Quall. And without further ado, James, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thanks so much. I'm honored to be here with Secretary Cardona and Randy and Becky, who have been such longtime champions for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And thank you to you both for your hard work to get this program the attention that they're entitled to. I also want to acknowledge the hard work of many people at the Department of Education, including Rich Cordray and Julie Morgan, whose leadership made this possible. President Biden believes deeply in the importance of educators and teachers and other public service who have answered a call to service at a very challenging time. But the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program has never lived up to its promise. It instead is full of tricks and traps and eligibility restrictions that make it extremely complicated. It could be compared to an American Gladiator's obstacle course in that very few make it to the end. Today's announcement that Secretary Cardona made is an important step toward fixing those challenges and trying to live up to the promise of the program. One major problem with PSLF has always been that many student loans, known as FFEL and Perkins loans, weren't eligible, even though they were the vast majority of loans at the time the PSLF program was created. Those loans can be converted to direct loans, which would make them eligible, but borrowers then need to restart their 10 years of payments from square one. So that is one thing we are changing. We are offering a waiver that allows borrowers to count payments from all loan programs and repayment plans toward forgiveness. And that step alone will help some 550,000 borrowers get closer to forgiveness, about average of about 2 years. Second important change we're making is we're going to make sure that active duty service members continue to make progress toward forgiveness, even if they are deferring payments while they are in military service. And we're going to create data matching programs with employers to automatically give borrowers credit for their work rather than forcing each borrower to file their own paperwork. We're going to start with other federal agencies and then explore similar partnerships with states and local governments and nonprofits. The third major area is to do whatever we can to fix past mistakes, and that includes a review by FSA staff to review denied applications to identify correct errors, and we're also retaining an outside company to review our contractors' work and recommend improvements to our systems and processes. I'd like to say we're going to fix everything at once, but it will take some time, and there probably will need to be further steps in addition to today's actions. But we're committed to working with Randy and Becky and all of you to fix the law if we need to and continue to live up to the promise of this program. Many borrowers will see their improvements show up automatically in their accounts in the next couple of months. Others may need to take action, such as consolidating their loans, applying for PSLF, or submitting proof of public service employment. I recommend that people get started as soon as possible, and the first step is to make sure that you have an account with FSA and your contact information is current so they can communicate with you directly about your loans. So, and I also would appreciate any efforts that you all can make to talk to your families, your neighbors, friends, colleagues, to make sure that people know what's needed so that they can take advantage of this waiver. We do have a website at www.studentaid.gov/PSLF waiver, and that's where our information is. So with that, I will turn it over to Randy for her comments.
Thank you. James, I just jumped on, and I know Randy's on also, and Becky's on. Is it okay if I jump in here just to say hello to everyone?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Well, James, thank you for sharing some of the information on there. I want to start off by saying to the educators on this call, thank you. This last year and a half has really thrown us educators a curveball, and not only did we rise for our students, we cared for them in ways that they needed. You've really been amazing, and you've kept the students at the center of the conversations. Unfortunately, things have gotten more divided than they should be, and you've continued to persevere. I just want to commend all the educators on this call for putting students first and for the commitment that you've displayed over the last year and a half. I'm proud to serve as your secretary, and know that along the way, I've been listening and working closely with Randy and Becky. Their leadership has been instrumental in our country's success, not only reopening schools, but doing it in a way that protects our students and our staff. So I want to thank both of them. And I want to tell you that, you know, I'm in Texas right now, and I jumped on a little bit late because I just got in my vehicle from visiting a high school who, despite whatever challenges they have politically here, they're following the rules to keep our students and staff safe, and our kids are learning and thriving in person. So, you know, we need to support our educators. As Secretary of Education, I'm committed to doing what I can to lift the profession. You know, I've been in the profession for over 23 years, and we've always been asked to do more with less. We need to change that, and we need to change that not only by supporting our teachers during Teacher Appreciation Week, or we really need to make sure that we're making the profession a profession where people want to be there. We need to make sure that we're investing in education. And in the Build Back Better agenda, there are ways to invest in the profession. But what we're talking about today is another way that we're trying to honor our educators, making sure that we're simplifying the PSLF process. You shouldn't have to jump through hoops. If you give 10 years of service to the community, you should have loans forgiven. That's as simple as that. We're going to make sure that we fix whatever issues there are. We're going to make sure we simplify the process, and we're going to make sure we're reviewing the processes that we have to fix whatever's broken. As James said, it's not going to happen overnight, but we're committed to making sure we make this process simpler. You deserve it. You work hard. You should be focusing on serving students, not jumping through hoops to get this looked at. So know that we're committed to this. Not only educators, nurses, military service members. We're gonna continue to work together. We're gonna continue to listen to our partners, our educators, AFT, NEA educators, and other folks who are set to benefit from this, to make sure that we make it simple for you. We need to serve. We need to be more of a service agency, and we're taking a step here. The president's been very bold about wanting to do this. We're taking a step forward to make sure we're providing a simpler pathway to public service loan forgiveness. So that's the announcement today. We're thinking about our educators who bent over backwards for our students, and we have to deliver for them now, okay? You were made a promise by Congress over 10 years ago, and now it's time to deliver. Not only with this, but with the Build Back Better agenda, I'm really confident that our best days in education are ahead of us. So with that, I want to turn it over to Randy Weingarten. Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And I want to just, as I thank you, I just want to also recognize Becky Pringle, the NEA president, who will be speaking right after me, and Undersecretary of Education James Powell, who, you know, just got there as the Higher Education Undersecretary, but we worked very closely with him when he was Undersecretary during the Obama era. And I just also want to thank some of your staff, Mr. Secretary, because you are absolutely right. This is a promise that was made, and this is the first step of making sure that promise is kept. And I couldn't be happier to be on this call with you and with Becky and with Undersecretary Kval, because Undersecretary Kval has seen the kind of fight that we have made over all these years. NEA, Seth Frotman, the student loan groups, our union, for the people, some of whom are on Twitter today, people who believe that after 10 years of teaching, that they would actually have their loans forgiven. Only the call during the Betsy DeVos administration to say, okay, what gives now? And they're told that not even one payment was credited. They were told by their loan services, your payment was not the exact right amount, so you don't qualify. I mean, people have hundreds and thousands of dollars of loans that they thought were then going to be forgiven after, and instead they were put into other payment plans. It was Kafkaesque, and that is generous. It was in some ways an attempt not to give them the promise that President Bush Senator Clinton, Senator Kennedy, and others have done. And you are taking the steps to make that promise real. Steps that, by the way, we kept saying to Betsy DeVos and to others, you can change this administratively. You can fix this. And they kept saying, no, no, no. In fact, what they tried to do is they would bend over backwards for the loan servicers and not for the borrowers. Borrowers who, by the way, as you said, Secretary Cardona, borrowers who have actually made schools work, have reopened schools, are creating that kind of joy and passion for kids right now. And so as there's been the kind of madness and anarchy at school board meetings, from school to school, I've been in over 40 schools in the last 8 weeks in 20 different states. What you see is a love of learning, and you see our members, NEA members, AFT members, other teachers around the country wanting to be in school with kids safely and wanting kids to thrive. These are the folks who had a promise made to them that in 2007, that if they taught, or if they were in the military, if they worked for a nonprofit for 10 years and paid their loans in each and every one of those months, then the rest of them would be forgiven. So there's lots more to do here. This is a first step. There's going to be more announcements from the AFT in coming weeks related to public service loan forgiveness. I'm sure there's going to be more announcements from the NEA. As you all know, we sued Betsy DeVos over these issues, and we want to make sure that we end up dealing with that lawsuit and other things. And we're also working with our student loan partner, Summer, to help AFT members navigate this new process and make sure you got the forgiveness that you're promised. And so we will have more and more on that. AFT members will have access to Summer at no cost. It is a member benefit that we provide. And so details on today's changes and how to apply for them, you can go to meetsummer.org/PSLF. I'll put this on Twitter again, meetsummer.org/PSLF, and AFT members can go to aft.org/benefits/summer. So there's going to be lots and lots of more things to talk about, but this is about caring, fighting, showing up, and that elections matter. And you have an administration that actually cares about educators, cares about public schools, understands the dedication of who educators are, and actually did and listened to the changes that were needed to clean up what was a Kafkaesque, terrible, bureaucratic nightmare in terms of dealing with public service loan forgiveness. And without further ado, let me introduce my partner in all things education, the president of the NEA, Becky Pringle.
Thank you so much, Randy. Thank you, Secretary Cardona. Thank you, James. All of the folks joining us on the call. I could, of course, just say ditto to what everyone has said before me. This is a big day. This is a big day. Secretary Cardona, you know, our NEA members, all of our members, our AFT members, all educators across this country are realizing that this administration is keeping its promise. And for you to, Secretary Cardona, for you to say this day that there will be no more loopholes, that we're going to keep our promise to our educators, this is a big day. Now the work that the NEA, the AFT has done, that the NEA has done with, you know, we have worked with our Office of General Counsel and our member benefits and everything we could bring to bear at the NEA to help individual educators work through, navigate this convoluted, unfair, seemingly deliberate attempt to deny public servants what Congress intended them to have. This is a big day. These are major reforms that certainly initially will mean thousands, you know, tens of thousands, will eventually of educators will eventually have a path towards student debt forgiveness. But we know that in the lives of those individual people, it's going to be life-changing. Teachers like Mary, for example, math teacher from Oklahoma, who owes more after 10 years, more than what she ever borrowed. We know that's a rigged system. We know that. It's not a system that's designed to work with those people who have made a decision to go into education. It's not right, and we thank you for stepping up and partnering with us today. Before today, educators like Mary was told that she had the wrong loan, or she had to pay for another decade to get public service loan forgiveness. But for her and so many others, now relief is on the way. These reforms are especially important to educators of color, because we know the generational poverty that impacts our Black and Brown and Indigenous communities particularly is showing up in whether students decide to go into education or whether they can afford to stay in education. Because of the systemic and structural racism that is built into the social systems throughout this country, and housing and credit and employment and education, they have to borrow more, and they owe more, and they have to pay longer to become or stay educators. This will help us to recruit educators across the board, but especially educators of color. President Biden, certainly, and you, Secretary Cardona, you deserve so much credit for keeping your word to move forward on this and acting as quickly as you could. You didn't create the problem, but you are committed to fixing it. Even more credit goes, I have to say this out loud, to the thousands of educators who have spoken up and demanded change. Many of them, Secretary Cardona, we have asked to speak with you so you could understand the issue and the problem where it is hitting closest to our members. We have a coalition of over 200 organizations that have joined the NEA, and I know the AFT, in demanding this change. Sent almost 50,000 emails and heartbreaking letters to the Department of Education demanding this change. I know, Secretary Cardona, because I've heard you talk about those letters. They moved certainly me as president of the NEA, and I know they moved you. This is an example of when we have the right leaders who are willing to work with us, we can come together and we can actually make the change that we know our educators so need and deserve. And to Randy's last point, implementing these reforms, it will, we know that that's not easy. But we also know, Mr. Secretary, that you are committed to continuing to partner with Randy and I, because we've been at this a long time, and we put in place a lot of work in designing strategies and setting up sites for our members to go to so we can help them navigate it. So we have a lot of history and ideas behind us that we know that you can benefit from as you work so hard to implement this as easily and as quickly as you possibly can. We know that you are determined to keep that promise that after 10 years of public service, it will actually equal no student death. No excuses. That's what it will mean. And we are willing to partner with you to not stop until that promise is kept to everyone. I want to let you know that we are holding, Mr. Secretary, a webinar with our members tomorrow, because we want, after this announcement, to make sure that we move as quickly as possible so they know all that's involved, all that we are doing, and all that we will be doing for them to ensure that they get the debt relief they deserve. Thank you so very much. And I believe I will turn it over to James.
I think we have time for...
I'm going to just mention really quickly before I jump off. Becky and Randy, thank you for the partnership and the work that we're going to be doing moving forward. And, I just want to acknowledge James, Julie Morgan, Ben Miller, Richard Cordray. You have champions at the Department of Education that really believe in this and are really pushing this, and there's so many more. But it takes a whole team, and they're working really hard on this. And as someone mentioned earlier, elections matter. We're going to try to deliver for our educators that deserve it. I'll turn it back over to James. Thank you, everyone.
All right. I believe we actually now have some time to get into some questions that we received. Dr. Cardona had to jump off the call, but we thank him too. When people register for this town hall, we ask them to share their questions, and we have a few of them to now ask. First, I have a question from Crystal from West Virginia, and this one is for James. Crystal asks, I have been participating in the COVID-related payment pause on my student loans and expect to resume payments in February of 22. My question is, do all the on-time payments that I made prior to the pause count towards the 120 consecutive payment requirement, or do I have to start from zero and make 120 consecutive payments when I start repaying?
Yes, they do count. The payments you made before the pause, assuming the other eligibility requirements are met, those payments do count. The Pslf program does not, the payments do not have to be consecutive. The other thing that is worth mentioning is that the time during the pause also counts toward Pslf. So if you meet the employment criteria and the other requirements, all of those months also count toward the 120.
Thank you, James. We have another question. This one is for Becky. Becky Deborah from Kansas asks, I have already paid my loans for 10 years, and now they are telling me that I have been paying the wrong quote-unquote loans. I am desperate to retire. I had COVID last year and was really sick. My district isn't doing much to protect us. Is there help for me?
Yes, Deborah, there is. You know, it is absolutely wrong that educators have to borrow to become educators. It's wrong that student debt keeps them from fulfilling their dreams of being an educator. It is wrong that the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program has not lived up to its promise. And that's why we're so excited about the announcement by the Secretary to overhaul this program and to make it work as it was intended to. And so please know that we are going to be right there with you, and so is the AFT, so is the department. We're going to be partnering together to help you navigate that process to get the forgiveness that was promised and that you are entitled to, by the way. And after that, we're going to go forward seeking to end more student debt. So not just you, but we, Deborah, are going to ensure that more student debt is not incurred by those who want to become educators. We need them to follow me and Randy into the profession of teaching is absolutely essential. So we will be right there all along the way, making this a very quick and easy process.
Thank you, Becky, and thank you, Deborah, for that question. Next, we have a question for Randy, and Randy Shannon from Massachusetts asks, my service years keep getting rejected, but other staff at my school have gotten theirs approved. What should I do? Randy, are you there?
I am, but I'm on mute. So this is one of any number of the Kafkaesque maze that both Becky and I talked about, that where it seemed like the former department wanted to reject people's applications as opposed to approving them. So the first step is that that you're on this call, you're going to get these fact sheets, you're going to get that what happened was wrong, and you know that by hearing these changes, you know that there's a chance to have all of this reconsideration. The second step is to make sure your contact information and your employment certification is up to date with your servicer. The department is going to be reaching out to tens of thousands of people proactively, but only if they can contact them, and they're going to have that contact information. They're going to get permission from the servicers to obviously send contact information to all of you, but that you need to have. And third, though, and you heard Becky talk about the processes NEA is having, the processes in terms of AFT is that if you are an AFT member, then right now go to summer@aft.org/benefits/summer, and we're ready to help you sort this out right now. And that's why we're making this benefit free for everybody. Thousands of people. I mean, I think we have already saved people about $10 million from the work that they did with Summer on a very flawed system. And now with a new system, we're going to be able, and our goal is to get this information to every one of our members so that they're going to know what to do and how to do it. And we will, go through a lot more over the course of the next few weeks, and particularly if we have, as I said, we're in the midst of dealing with the lawsuit that we sued Betsy DeVos on as well, and I'm hoping to have some good news on that in the next few weeks as well.
Okay, we have a few more questions for James, actually. James, our next question comes from Sam from Ohio, and Sam asks, whenever I reached out to my servicer about financial hardship, my servicer recommended forbearance. Later, I learned that income-driven payment was actually the best option for me, but my servicer did not offer it. Will my months in forbearance count towards PSLF now?
Unfortunately, they may not. We did take a step today to count deferments connected to military service toward PSLF because that benefit was especially intended for active duty military and not to come at the expense of public service loan forgiveness. However, if you were misled by your servicer, that could potentially be part of the review that FSA is conducting with their accounts. So that's something I'd encourage you to consider.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Alton from New York, who asks, will forgiveness be extended to public service workers who have already retired but still owe on their loans?
Yes, the additional months of service will be credited to you, even if you are no longer working in public service. However, I believe you do need to be employed as a public service worker at the time of forgiveness as well. So that may be a wrinkle for you. And that, illustrates the continuing complexities and challenges we have of this program and the need for us, unfortunately, to color within the lines that were prescribed by Congress. And, I think that's one reason why we need to continue to hear these stories directly from teachers and work with Randy and Becky on continuing to improve this program.
Thank you, James. Our next question comes from Casey from Florida, who asks, I have been paying student loans on and off for 25 years. Could payments made before the PSLF program began, be included here?
Unfortunately not. The terms of the PSLF program as defined by Congress apply only to loans made after the program was created in 2007. And so in order to fix that, again, we would need some help from Congress.
Our next question comes from Javier from Maryland, who asks, who says, I am 56 years old and very close to retirement. Could repayment be reduced to 5 years for teachers over 50 like me?
I think that's a really interesting idea, and we are going to continue to study ways to strengthen and improve this program. The 10-year service requirement, again, is a requirement that was defined by Congress, but we are taking a look at improving the program and whether there's any room for us to do it through our own regulations, or if not, what the interest might be in Congress for this improvement and for some of the other things that have been mentioned.
Next up, we have a question from Lila from Minnesota, who asks, could the payment be based on income after taxes instead of before taxes? That
is another idea worth considering. And As you know, the PSLF program works closely with the income-driven repayment plan, which defines earnings as a share of income. And President Biden has promised to make that plan more generous, reducing monthly payments in that plan. And my colleagues at the Department of Education have begun the process for doing that. That is something we can do through the regulatory process, which is a structured and time-consuming process, but it doesn't require congressional action. And we will be making a call to the general public for ideas on how to write those rules, and I think that would be an excellent idea to consider.
And it looks like we have time for one final question. And Jennifer from California asks, I recently heard that FedLoan, my servicer, is not going to service student loans anymore. I have changed servicers before, and there were a lot of problems getting my loan amount, payment history, and everything else transferred over correctly. How is the department getting ready for all of this to happen at once?
I'm sorry to hear about those problems that you've had before. There are a number of accounts that need to be transferred from FedLoan, and watching that process is a very top priority for Rich Cordray, who is now the Chief Operating Officer for our Federal Student Aid Office. So we are working very, very closely with FedLoan and the other federal contractors to make sure that that process goes as smoothly as possible.
Well, thank you for all your wonderful responses, James, and thank you all for listening. The Education Department, the AFT, and the NEA will have many more resources to share on today's important announcement through their websites and social media. Would you like to say any final words, Randy and Becky?
Sure. I just want to, again, thank all who were involved. The Secretary rightly said that there are many people that are responsible for this day happening. And I want to applaud, again, their commitment to standing by the promise that was made to our public servants, to the people who have dedicated their lives to educating America's students. And we stand ready. You heard Randy say that, and I will add that as well, that both of us are standing ready to help all of our educators. We have been working with them, have saved them just millions of dollars. It's quite extraordinary what can be done. So please, please reach out. You can find more information for our NEA members at nea.org/student debt. We can begin to work with you and help you right now. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Becky. I also want to thank Rashid for letting us use the technology that we have used on, our town halls. I understand we had about 15,000, maybe more, people on the town hall at one point or another during this town hall at short notice, NEA and AFT members. And this is just an example of people work really hard. Educators work really hard, and they have stood up so much in the midst of COVID for our kids, for our community. So have other public servants, firefighters, nurses, the military. And they were made a promise in 2007, a bipartisan promise that said, look, you're valuable, and we know that you don't make enough money. And so if you spend 10 years in the public service, you're going to get the rest of your student debt forgiven. And when that promise was starting to be, accounted for, when it was supposed to be realized, you had Donald Trump and Betsy DeVos, who did nothing, just made it worse. And now we have a president who said, yeah, I do really care, and I do really want to make this better. And we know how valuable you are, and particularly in a year like this, when people are going back to school and helping kids with this kind of recovery that we know we need for the country. A promise made this administration saying Secretary Cardona and his team is a promise kept. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. There's going to be a whole lot of things that have to get done. But both NEA and AFT are going to be there at the ready for our members, us with summer, NEA with the various things that the NEA has. But this is about really just saying thank you, not just to the Secretary and his team, James Clow, Julie Morgan, Richard Cordray, but thank you to the people who are still in education that haven't given up, that know what important work they do and you do. And this is us fighting to make sure that you get some of the benefits to which you ought to be entitled, including the forgiveness of burdensome student debt. So thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight.